Okay, let's continue on with creating a server. So, where we left off was we were doing the practice part one, my first web server part one, and we're creating all of these if statements in order to handle different requests from the client. So, if we've completed it out, it might look something like this. Uh, if post if it's a post to the path users, then just add a new user hard coded. And then if it's a put to the path user /1, then just update the first user to something, whatever, doesn't matter. And then if the method is delete to the path user /1, then just remove something from the array with a pop, which is fine, and then send back the word deleted. So if we look in Postman and we see, let's see, users, we can get all users. If we do a post, sends back a new user. And then if we do a get again, we see that that one is added to the array. And now we can get it. It's included in the get. If we let's see, what else is there? Put, if we put to users /1, let's see, something else, it responded, oh, let's change that to return the entire object of whatever we updated, not just the name property. Okay, so now we do, the name is updated for ID number 1 to something else that we just modified. And then let's see, if we do a delete, then it says deleted. And then if we get everything again, then that last one is gone. It's no longer there. Okay, so we completed the most common combinations of paths and methods, which is our REST specifications. This is the most common ones you'll ever run into. Getting everything, getting one thing, creating one thing, updating one thing, and then deleting one thing. Those are the most common ones, and we're going to just focus on those for this class. So if we continue with our Express step-by-step, next slide is asking a question. Why did we use the path users in order to do, for a get or a post, in order to get users or to deal with users? Why did we use the path users /1 when we wanted to get one user or update one user? Or I might even say, even for the delete, when we wanted to delete one user. So for these ones that are dealing with just one single thing, shouldn't it have just been /user instead of users, singular versus plural? Why? What is the reasoning for doing it the plural way? So the concept behind this is that there are no rules to this. So you can use any path you want, but it's important to stay consistent. So if we looked at the narrative of this, we might say something like this. And again, there's no rules to this. This is just something that we're going to stick with for consistency. If we say /users with a get method, that just means we want to get all of the users. So it would not make sense, probably, if we just said user, get user, and then we retrieve all the users. That kind of would not make sense. So we have to stick with the plural. We don't have to, but we really want to. So if you do a users plus post, well, that means you are just creating one user. So you might say, well, why don't you just put user? But again, we immediately are turning it inconsistent, and we can't do that. So you can think of it more as, it means get the entire array of users and then add another user to it. Same thing with get /1. It means look at the entire array of users, find the first one, and get it. Same thing with put and delete. We first are telling the server, find the users, all of them. and then do something to one of them. Okay, so that's a way, hopefully maybe that helps you understand why we are making these certain paths with the methods, the certain REST combinations. Again, there's no rules to this. You just have to think of a way to do it, stay consistent, and this is the most common, popular way to design REST APIs. Okay, if we look at the next slide, we'll say, is Express aware of the concept of REST? And we said, yep. We don't have to write all this if statement logic ourselves because Express is fully aware of this and it has built-in functionality to do REST things. So instead of me having to write explicitly say, do an if statement, check for get, and then check for the path, and then do whatever, we can shorten this. I will just get rid of all this. We don't need this anymore. And I can just say, okay, app is going to have a built-in function called get, which replaces the checking of the get on the method. And then you put in a path as the first argument, and then that function is now the second argument instead of the first argument. Okay, so if I save that and I go to get my name, it is now doing the exact same thing that it was doing before. But if you look at the code, obviously you can see that this is way less code, and that is fine. We just have to understand that no functionality, nothing has changed functionally. The server is doing the exact same thing under the hood in this get function. The server is doing this. So all it did was say, I'm just going to put this in a function for you, and you don't have to do this yourself. Okay, so next slide. So do we understand what is going on here? So we have to understand that we did not change the response to the client in any way. Express just gave us a shortcut so that we can do something with without having to type more code. So the question is, can you infer what other things you can do with these built-in REST methods? So what else do you think is on app to do dot something besides get? So you might say, is there a dot post? Well, you might guess that, and you might be right. So all of the things that there used to be in terms of what we were checking for in if statements, there are now specific methods for specific functions that represent those HTTP methods. So we might guess that there is one for put, and we need another one for get, but slash, oh, and these are all users if we switch that out. But hopefully you see the pattern, and what you need to do next is to change your code so that it uses these built-in HTTP method, these built-in REST functions to do the gets and posts and not have to write your own if statements. And that is part 2 of the project. So go ahead and do that, and we'll continue after we are done with that. Okay, if we completed part 2, we might now have something that looks like this, where we have different app dot somethings per to replace the if statements that we were coding before. So we have a get to users, a get to user /1, a post to users, a put to users /1, and then a delete to users /1. Okay, so the code, the actual code that gets run is exactly the same. What we've just taken is the repetitive if statements out of there. So if I go back to Postman, I can kind of see this is still working. Users, get to users, gets all of them. And then getting one, let's see. Getting one users does not work because I forgot this slash. Now it works. Posting new users creates a new user. And then, let's see, putting updates one user, and then deleting deletes one user. Okay, so everything is working the same as it was. We just coded it a different way, and this is more realistic. You're going to be using these REST helper functions. You're not going to be writing those if statements manually. Okay, so let's look at another scenario. So let's look at our get to users. What if we forget to tell the server to respond to the client, which means here in our get /users, let's say I did not do a response JSON, but maybe I just console logged out users or something. But whatever I coded, the point is that whatever this I coded here, this is not telling the server to respond to the client. Only .send or .json does that, but if we forget to do it, what happens? So I'll go in Postman and I'll say, let's do a get to /users and send. And I can see Postman, and I might try this in the browser also to kind of more see it in a more familiar environment. We can see that the tab is spinning. We can see that Postman just keeps saying loading, loading, and nothing is happening. So what's going on there? Well, you told the server to recognize this request, but you then told it inadvertently, by not coding properly, you told it to ignore the request. So both the client, whether it's Postman or the browser, they made the request and they're waiting for the server to respond. But the server doesn't ever respond. The server just said, I'm not going to respond to you. Well, that's very, very unexpected behavior from the server. And the client doesn't know that you coded the server incorrectly, or that the server is messed up. It doesn't know that. So it's just waiting, expecting eventually that it will respond, but it's not going to. So this is a very bad situation to get into. And there's nothing to safeguard against this. So if you happen to code this, there's nothing that's going to tell you, oh, this is bad, don't do that. You're just going to see that the client will just be spinning, waiting for a response, and that's all that can be done about it. So the client expects a response. If the server doesn't respond, that's a very bad situation to get in. So you need to be aware of this and always keep an eye out for this. There always needs to be either a .json or a .send, or there can be one other thing or one or two other things, which we'll look at later, but it's definitely, there can't just be nothing or just like a console log, because that doesn't, console logging, all that does is it console logs to the terminal where you started your web server. That's just normal behavior. So that has nothing to do with responding to the client. So I console logged out the users array, and then that was it, and then nothing. So we need to be aware of this, and eventually the browser will say, this is ridiculous. I've waited so long. I'm not going to wait any longer, and you'll get an error. So here, Postman just errored out and said could not respond, and that's just not a good thing. So be aware of that. What do we have next? So given that, let's look at the third parameter. So we have in our functions, we've had this third parameter next, but we haven't been using it. And so we want to understand why that parameter exists. So I'm going to say, let us put in this sample code, and I'm going to ask you to guess what is going to be, well, two things. What's going to be console logged into the terminal, so right here, and then what's going to be sent back to the client. So we looked at this for a little bit, and we said, what console logging here, so maybe that's kind of obvious. It's going to console log hello1, but is this function even going to be hit? Is this function even going to be hit? We can notice this doesn't have a .json. This doesn't have one. This one does. Actually, let's stop there. So this is kind of a new section. So I will make another video for that part of the Express lesson. Okay.